Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining me today to share your story. I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Yarrow, it's great to connect again. Thanks for having me today.
It really is. So we're going to keep this informal because it's a personal story, but it is a business one. So I'm sure we're going to, and you're a smart guy. And I even with the way you describe things, know this is going to be really impactful for those of you who are driven people, which really connects with the topic, I think, today. So I know you and I off air, we're trying to nut down a really specific title, but I think the best one, but we'll see where this goes, is essentially how to become a young CEO, a person who gets into the CEO leadership role at a young age. And I know in your case, that was in your early 20s. But before we dive into that part, maybe can we start with one question is, what were you personally actually aiming to achieve at that stage in your life? What was your goal or purpose?
That's a great question. I think at that young, probably naive age, I was a self-described ambitious young entrepreneur, definitely driven, definitely chasing too many ideas and projects at the same time, and really just trying to find a path, trying to figure out who I was, what my identity was, and how I could be successful. So I was going to the events, I was reading the books, I was absorbing and learning from mentors, and trying to find my path to entrepreneurship or business or investing, um, and ultimately found that, by putting out a lot of value for other people and connecting. But to be honest, at that young age, I was probably just trying to make money.
I was going to say, was there a specific goal? Like, could we say I wanted to make 100,000 a year, or I wanted to drive a certain car? Like, was there that kind of thinking at that time?
Yeah, there was probably two big goals. I don't know how relevant they are now, but there was two big goals I can reflect on. One was um, when I was 20, I set a 10-year goal to be able to buy a supercar in cash by the time I was 30. Right? just a silly material object, but it just seems
Uh,
like, if I can afford to do that and pay cash and therefore still maintain my lifestyle, that'd be a nice achievement
was
to hit
there
by
a
30.
was there a certain car in particular?
Yeah, well, long story short, I hit it after 8 years, not 10, and I bought a beautiful Porsche 911 that's still garaged in Australia, and I'm very fond of. Um, and the other one was, I guess, the milestone point towards that was that I wanted to make $1 million or be a millionaire by 25.
Wow,
So that's what I was chasing.
and that was at 20. So you had a short horizon for all intents and purposes, 5 years.
Yeah, the goal to hit a million by 25 was probably set in my teen years. I think that was always there. It was a clear vision. And then the 10-year goals around the car and things like that was set at 20.
Okay. Now we haven't really kind of put the what's the term? I'm thinking of Google Maps here. The destination point, the end point. We haven't really placed where you are today. So just in summary, I mean, you've obviously achieved the becoming of a CEO. But in summary, who are you, Mike, right now?
Oh, good question. I would describe myself as a blend of an entrepreneur and a CEO, and more recently an investor. So I just love building and operating businesses in general, whether or not I start them up or scale them up, or help buy and sell them. And I'm Australian, obviously. I'm from Brisbane. I'm currently based in Singapore, where I've lived for the last 3.5 years with my young family. And a couple of our major assets are in the travel industry. So in an ordinary year, I'm based here and traveling all over the world. And Singapore is a great hub to do that from.
Now, can we name drop some of these companies, or are these secrets?
Of course, of course. So the biggest of which that we'll talk about is a company called Vroom Vroom Vroom, which is a fun name. It's a car rental aggregator website, and it's the largest in the Southern Hemisphere. So we compare prices and book car rental reservations for Hertz, Avis, Budget, Thrifty, Europcar, all the major players all over the world. Um, our biggest markets are Australia and New Zealand, but we also book cars in the US, Canada, UK, Europe, primarily Western markets, primarily in English, but we do a fair bit of volume. And this is the 20th year of the Vroom business. So it's almost the age of the modern internet. It's been around a long time in terms of e-commerce circles. And I've been involved with that business for the last 10 years. So I sort of got involved almost at the halfway mark and have been responsible for its journey since. Um, I've also got a complementary business, or a sister business to that, as we describe it, that I founded back in 2014, and it's a specialty car rental insurance business. We learned all about underwriting and claims handling and pricing risk, and launched an insurance business a few years ago, which has been also quite successful. And Vroom was the first customer, our distribution platform for that insurance product, but now it has its own distribution through many competitors to Vroom and direct channels as well. And I also run a private investment outfit called Mudbrick Capital, which was always my private family entity, which has now morphed into a slightly more sophisticated investment company, making investments in other companies and alternative investments in real estate. So yeah, there's always plenty keeping me busy.
So 10 years ago, when you joined Vroom Vroom Vroom, that I remember seeing I think it was your LinkedIn change to CEO, and that's where I first saw it. How old were you when that happened?
Yeah, so I first got involved with Vroom at the age of 22, and I was involved originally as a consultant for about a year, working a day a week, and because I was interacting with a lot of external companies and suppliers to the business, I had assumed the title of COO, or at least that was bestowed on me, because I was doing a lot of business building activity, a lot of commercial activity for the business. And then about a year into that journey, we reached an agreement to go full time, and I assumed the CEO role, and I was 23 at the time.
Okay, so that is young for a CEO, especially
young, yeah.
Not a CEO who was just putting that label on a company they founded, and it's really them and a couple of contractors. I've done that in the past.
Yeah,
you actually were hired to be a CEO of a going concern at 23
correct.
years old. So I'd really love to break down, how is that even possible? Like, why did anyone trust you? And B, did you plan for that? So maybe we can go back to those years at the start. Were you looking to become CEO of another company?
No, not at all. Actually, quite the opposite. And it's funny looking back on it now, because I actually resisted the move for quite a while. I didn't see myself at the time as a CEO or an employee of any kind. I identified with being an entrepreneur, and I felt that the only path to entrepreneurship was founding something from scratch and building it up, and being that startup CEO, as you describe, and creating new value in the world. And I guess over the last 10 or so years, I've matured to realize that there's lots of ways to create new value in the world. There's lots of ways to build businesses, and sometimes starting with something that is pre-existing and building on that, you can actually do a lot more damage a lot more quickly. And I mean damage in a positive way. You can really have an enormous impact. So I guess to rewind a little bit, I was friendly with a couple of the early employees and what would be considered technical co-founders of the Vroom business. In my early 20s, we'd connected in Brisbane, and they were great guys, brothers, and they were working in this successful startup called Vroom Vroom Vroom. And we obviously kept in touch, and one day they reached out with a request for somebody, and perhaps that was me, to come in and give them a little bit of advice. And I was sort of shaping myself as a bit of a digital consultant at the time, while I was bootstrapping and founding startups and just being a bit scrappy, trying to find my way. So I was doing some consulting on the side to pay the bills, and I said, sure, I'll come in and have a look at your issues and see if I can add some value. Um, and I guess the easiest way to sum it up is that Vroom was an incredibly successful early startup because it had a fantastic technical product and it had tremendous SEO value. So it had a lot of traffic, it had a great car rental booking engine, and transactions were flowing through. So it was naturally profitable. But this was about 9 or 10 years into the journey. It was post global financial crisis, and I guess things were starting to fray at the edges a little bit. The startup was successful, but almost too successful for itself in that it didn't have the necessary systems and infrastructure to continue to grow. It was held back by trying to remain small and scrappy. And so I got in and as a consultant looked at some of their issues, and most of them were commercial issues. They were things like legal contracts that were out of date, or commission payments that hadn't been made by car rental companies, or major supply issues. And so I got in and started helping them with that, put some early runs on the board. It wasn't particularly strenuous work, but there was a lot to do, and figuring out what to do first to have the most impact was the challenge. And at the same time, working with an existing team. It was a global team. It was headquartered in Brisbane, but there was boots on the ground in the US and in the UK, and various remote team members across Asia. So I was sort of interfacing and learning the culture of a business while also interfacing with external car rental companies and suppliers, trying to get these contracts and things sorted out. So I did that on and off, 1 day a week as a consultant for about 12 months. And I was building another business at the time, attempting to anyway, as an entrepreneur. So
was that other business at all related in terms of skill set to what you were doing as a consultant?
Somewhat. It was a software as a service solution for the mining and engineering space. So it still was a digital meets traditional industry type play, but nothing to do with travel or car rental.
Okay, so before you continue the story, what was your skill set, and how did you acquire it that they would even consider taking you on 1 day a week as a consultant to do all this operational work?
Yeah, great question. So, it's incredibly long story, I guess, if we connect dots backwards, and I'll try and just give you the highlights. But I guess by the time I got to the age of 22, 23, I almost had a decade of business experience under my belt. And that might sound crazy
Yes.
to hear, but in some shape or form, I'd made a lot of failures in a lot of startups as an entrepreneur, and learned a few lessons. Now, I went to university. I had a business degree. I had an applied science degree. I ticked the formal qualifications. But really, I was known for my street smarts rather than my book smarts. And, my entrepreneurial journey started at the age of 11, selling lost golf balls that I'd fished out of the creek, and polishing them up and selling them on. And during high school, I had an aquarium servicing business. And during university, I had a number of businesses, a couple of which were quite successful. There was a party hire company where we rented the equipment to dispense beer kegs and frozen daiquiri machines and all sorts of things. So I did have a bit of a track record in using digital marketing to grow traditional businesses, and had started up a number of attempts to build digital businesses, like I started a coffee app to pre-order coffee ahead of time and skip the queue. And there wasn't enough money in that, and I abandoned that project after about 12 months. But those apps are now popular today. I was just a decade too early. So I'd sort of been around the traps. I'd started a not-for-profit called The Hive, where we met, and also where I met the guys at Vroom. And that was all about connecting the entrepreneurial community in our city. And that's something I did for free and did for 3 years consistently. And that massively grew my network, and my standing, and people knew about me and what I was doing. And I can trace back a lot of amazing opportunities that I got as a result of putting in the work and creating value with no expectation of return during the years that I ran The Hive. So the other point to answer your question is when I started consulting for them, it was never a set day a week. It was, we have a problem. It's on fire. Can you please come in tomorrow for an hour or two? Like help. we need help. So I came in. I can't remember what the specific issue was. I think it was a contract. And I just came in and said, look, I won't even charge you. I'll just come in and help you out as a mate and see if I can help. And so I went in and, a couple of hours turned into, gosh, this is a mess. I'll come back tomorrow. And then, we solved the first problem or two. I got to see under the covers of this business and just spotted massive opportunity. There was just so much that could be done. And so the conversations evolved from there, and they said, well, do you want to do more of this? And I said, not really, because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm building this other business. But at the same time, I do need to feed myself. I need to pay the bills. And so, at most I could carve out a day a week. And that probably took, I can't remember, maybe a month or 6 weeks to evolve to the day a week point. But it was sort of after I'd helped them out a few times and proved my worth. And so fast forward to 12 months. And throughout that 12 months of doing a day a week, the major shareholder wasn't actually present in the headquarters in Brisbane. They were based in the UK, a long way away. And I'd never met them, but it was a husband and wife team. I'd never met them, but we'd Skyped and chatted frequently and exchanged emails. And I was providing updates as to what we were achieving with the business in that 12 months. And they were very impressed with what I was able to do, the growth that I'd unlocked or the commercial problems that I'd solved, renegotiating supply agreements, getting commission increases and things like that for the business, as well as helping to shape the team. There was an existing team in place and we were putting some structure around that and helping the coach managers and things.
Let me stop you there, Mike. I can see there's a question that I'm curious about here. You just said three very diverse things. You were hiring, you were solving commercial agreements, and I think you were it was growth aspect, so a marketing aspect. And before that, you said you came into the company and you just saw all these opportunities everywhere. Now you're a 23-year-old. Okay, sure, you've had this history of, an app here, golf ball selling there, aquarium supply company here. You were doing a lot of different diverse things. So you're obviously naturally entrepreneurial, but you're stepping into a 10-year-old company, and sure, you see opportunities, but how do you even have the sense of confidence to go, yes, you could do that, and I could be the one to execute on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I don't know. I've always had,
How do we replicate this, Mike?
I know. If I could clone myself, I'd be pretty happy with that. Yeah. I've always been quite self-aware. Coming up through high school, and I won't go on too many tangents here, but I was an incredibly shy kid, to the point where I couldn't interact with strangers. And I went on a massive personal growth journey during high school, where I started in grade 8, lining up at the tuck shop or canteen, as your Northern Hemisphere listeners might recognize it. And I'd get to the front of the line just to buy a can of Coke at lunchtime. And I was so shy and embarrassed that I would actually bail out of the line as soon as it was my turn to talk to the person behind the counter. It was just crippling. I couldn't function. And I went on this massive journey, read all the books. My favorite book to this date is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Hugely shaped a young 12, 13-year-old for me. And that spiraled into reading, all the greats, all the classics, Think and Grow Rich, Richest Man in Babylon, learning sales skills, communication skills, people skills. And, very quickly as a young teen, I realized that I didn't want to be the shy, geeky kid. I wanted to be able to go and have the confidence to chase girls and build businesses and do all these wonderful things. And so I almost self-taught through a lot of books and a lot of courses and just absorbing everything I could. Had the support of a great school that had a leadership program, and that also helped me. And 5 years later, at the end of my high school journey, I started as the shy kid that couldn't order a can of Coke, and I finished as the school captain, excited to talk in front of 2,000 people on stage. at graduation. So it was a massive, massive transformation. And, I'm not trying to downplay the amount of work that went into that. It was enormous. But that really set a fire in my belly. And my journey as school captain and grade 12 and achieving academically as well as socially and otherwise really proved to me what I was capable of. I can achieve a lot in a short amount of time, because that year was incredibly intense and stressful for me. And so as I approached university, I wasn't actually all that interested in university. I spent most of my time outside of lectures building businesses. And I was always running 3, 4, 5 things at a time, always meeting new people, always connecting, always learning and growing. So how did I have the confidence to manage staff and hire staff and reshape an organization that was pre-existing? I think it's because I had that formative experience of firstly transforming myself, and then without dictating how someone else needed to transform, I could gently coach and encourage and shape others and provide experiences and stories about how I'd done that myself. So I didn't come in as a big boss telling everyone what to do. I just tried to unlock their value and the value in the business and get more things done more quickly. And I guess to your point about how do you come into a 10-year-old business and spot opportunities and do something about it, I think that's the benefit of coming into a pre-existing business of any age. The business has already found product market fit. It's already making money or has customers. All of a sudden, the entrepreneurial challenge is completely different. There's levers and dials and things that you can pull to optimize the existing business rather than spending all your energy trying to find one customer. And so, I looked around and saw a lot of low-hanging fruit, whether it was, we're doing 500 car rental bookings over here through this supplier, but they're paying us 20% less than the other supplier. So maybe we should either encourage those customers to book with the supplier that pays us more, or maybe we should renegotiate that contract and bring it up to market rates because it hasn't been negotiated for 5 years. And so by doing nothing other than renegotiating a contract which had already expired, we were able to get 20% gains and things like that with commission increases. So, it was an amazing journey. It was a great, it was like my playground, if you like. Everything that I had been working towards and learning, I could now apply in an existing business with an existing revenue stream and an existing team, which meant that we saw feedback and results really quickly. And, to finish the original story, I did 12 months of consulting. Throughout that 12 months, the major shareholder approached me on 4 separate occasions to come on full time. They were very pleased with what I was able to achieve 1 day a week. And they approached me a few times and said, hey, this is great. Love what you're doing. Imagine what you could do if we had 5 days a week. And on each of those first occasions, I politely declined and said, look, I'm self-aware enough to know that I am an entrepreneur. I don't see myself as an employee. And if I take on this role and come full time, not only would I have to give up my existing startup that I'm working on, but I think I would probably be very sad after 2 or 3 months because it's just not how I identify. I mean, the title is great, the money's great, and that's all, good for the ego, but it's not what I was actually seeking. And so the first 3 times I turned them down. I was 22. I don't think I'd turned 23 yet. I was 22. They'd offered me a global CEO role based on my 12 months of 1 day a week. And wow. I said no.
Okay.
And
well, do you mind, it was on the, can you reveal the salary at the time? I mean, I know it was a while ago, but I'm assuming a 22-year-old is not used to a CEO salary either.
Yeah, good question. I mean, my consulting rate wasn't bad either. So I was already making some money. But yeah, certainly multiplying that by 5 or thereabouts was a healthy 6-figure salary on offer.
Yeah.
So, at 22, that's like, go and buy yourself a nice car, put the deposit down for a house, that sort of thing. Right. And really get going in life. Probably jumping forward a decade or more.
Yeah.
So it was a real opportunity. But I was quite mature about it, I think, in saying, look, if I accept this, we will all be excited for a couple of months. and then it'll probably unwind because it's just not aligned to my value system.
Mm.
And so I said, I'm happy to continue consulting for as long as I've got the time, because I love you guys, love the business, but full-time CEO is not for me. I have to build my own thing. And towards the end of the 12 months, my startup that I had been working on imploded, and catastrophically. We found that we'd been trading insolvent, and some investors that had put some money in had moved it around and done some fraudulent stuff, and it was really terrible. And we discovered that we had to wind up that business very quickly, let go of our 3-person team. I was in tears. It was terrible. My whole pride was attached to that business, right? Because that was my baby that I'd founded from scratch. And I'd partnered with some older, wiser entrepreneurs who ended up doing some bad things, and I learned some great lessons from that. But it was a catastrophic failure. And
see, that's
so
the story I expect at 23 years old.
Yeah,
that part.
Exactly. Taken advantage of, ripped off, nearly bankrupt at 22, and exactly. So that happened. That I got some deep scars from that one. But no joke, and this is the fairy tale serendipity moment. I was pretty down in the dumps, and my whole world had collapsed. And 3 days later, the major shareholder in Vroom, Peter was his name, Pete, called me from the UK, and he didn't know about any of this. He didn't know that my other startup had collapsed. And he called me out of the blue and he said, Mike, I've figured it out. You are an entrepreneur. You're not an employee. You have to build your own thing. I still want you to come on full time at Vroom and keep doing more of what you're doing. But I understand you need to build your own business. So I want you to come take some shares in the business, take some equity, which we will give you with some KPIs around. And I want you to come on board and build it like it's your own. And I went, gee, Pete, you've really twisted my arm. I think, I'll finally say yes. And he didn't know that, everything else had just crumbled around me. It was just so serendipitous. And so I went from complete wipeout 1 week to turning up on Monday the next week and going full time at Vroom. And then shortly thereafter, made the transition to CEO of a small and growing business that was a global concern. And I was 23 years old.
Wow. Okay. And I would guess your self-esteem and confidence might have been a little bit shattered as you entered this full-time CEO role due to the other one failing. How did you feel at that point when it's, you the commander in chief 5 days a week now? You got to prove that you're not this one-hit wonder consultant.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a roller coaster of emotions, right? You go through all that self-doubt of, am I worth it? Can I do this? I mean, I think at the time when I joined the business as CEO, I was the youngest employee.
Wow. So
you talk about
how did they take that?
You talk about managing up, right?
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough that the group of people in the Brisbane office that I had interfaced with over the prior 12 months were just an incredible group of people, including Rich and Dave, who I'd originally known and had asked me to come in. Working with them on a more full-time capacity was a great learning journey, I think, for all of us. And we very much got in the trenches and did the work together as a team. I was very cautious not to come in as the big boss, knowing it all. I came in asking a lot of questions. My role was a coach to begin with. It was asking questions to unlock what was in people's heads, because obviously they've been in the business a lot longer than me. And sometimes getting them to answer those questions, they would realize opportunities themselves, and other times I would realize them. And then as a team, we would sit down and prioritize those and choose what we were going to pursue next. But it was very much it wasn't command and control. It was very much collaborative and how do we do this as a team? But certainly I did have a chip on my shoulder for a long time in my 20s because I was so young. And I'd throw the suit on and I'd get on the plane and I'd fly down to Sydney and Melbourne. And because of the title and the stature of the role, I'm meeting with the Asia Pacific CEO of the Hertz Corporation, and he's running a $200 million business, and I'm running a whatever, not a $200 million business, but because I'm the CEO, you know, we're going out to lunch at some fancy restaurant in Melbourne, or, you know, sitting down with the head of Avis budget group in Sydney. And, you know, I knew walking into those meetings that I look young, and I don't behave young. I've always been mature for my age, and everyone's always told me that. But I had to work incredibly hard those first 3 years in that role to prove myself, not only to my business partners today, the major shareholders and the team. I had to win their trust, but I also had to win the industry. You know, all of these suppliers and partners that we dealt with, because, you know, they said, "Who's this kid?" And so for a long time, that was my motivation. It was something that I would just continuously say to myself in my head, almost like a mantra, was, "Don't worry about my age. Look at the scoreboard. Don't worry about my age. Look at the scoreboard. You know, don't judge me on a number. Judge me on the scoreboard. Right? Look at what I'm achieving. Look at the results. Look at the growth." And, you know, and that worked, but there were plenty of moments of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, feeling inadequate, feeling out of my depth. And, you know, I can only be thankful for the incredible people that I had around me were, by and large, supportive, and could see that we as a team were making great progress. And so they were very patient and understanding with the learning journey that I was going on as well, because of course no one's perfect.
So I feel like people listening to this are more inclined to want to be, let's say, CEOs, just because of how I'm going to title this. You know, it's how to become a CEO at 23 years old and of a 10-year-old company. So let's maybe lean towards that side, less so the entrepreneur side. What do you think it takes, especially now that you've lived the CEO role for 10 years, what does it take to have the type of, you know, performance, personality to be considered a CEO, and B, how do you fast track that so you can get there as quickly as possible?
Yeah. I think it's people skills. And I reflect on that journey of starting with zero people skills and developing myself with a lot of personal development and mentors and coaching throughout high school. I think a lot of life and a lot of success comes down to being a great communicator. And, you know, I referenced that the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was my favorite. I've read that book every year, at least once per year, every year since I first read it. You know, so it's a classic text. There's always something new that I get from it, and works like that, I think, have shaped me. And being a leader, whether it's a CEO or any leader in a community organization or otherwise, all comes down to people and getting the most out of them. First, you need to establish rapport, and you need to build trust. Then, and only then, can you offer insights or instructions and expect someone to follow you as a leader. And I've found that coaching collaborative approach to leadership has been very, very effective in the organizations that I've led. And, you know, to get to your question about how do you become a CEO at a very young age and get those opportunities, for me, I came in as a problem solver. You know, I came in and I did identify problems. I saw low-hanging fruit, as I mentioned before, but then I got in, took responsibility to solve them. Because oftentimes, if you come into an established organization, there is an element of, this is the way we've always done things. And usually it's not rocket science what needs to be improved. It's just, you have to break inertia. It's that, you know, this is the way we've always done it. We've been meaning to get to that, but we've got 100 other things to do. And so it can just sort of sit there for now. It's not the highest priority. And then if you come in with outside insight, when you're seeing something for the first time, sometimes it seems glaringly obvious to you, but not so glaringly obvious to someone inside the business that's sort of been aware of that problem, but let it fester for a while. And so I identified problems like that, rallied the troops and sought buy-in to do that together. And then we would approach that because we would understand the importance of it. And somewhere along the lines, I learned this great quote. And it comes from military practice. And I'm sorry, I don't know who to attribute the quote to, but it goes, "Those who plan the battle don't battle the plan. Those who plan the battle don't battle the plan." And what it means is, if you get buy-in first, right? If you seek buy-in from other people and you win them to your way of thinking first, and you get them to collaborate on the plan of what it is that we're about to go and do, then you don't get halfway into approaching it and have people pushing back against you and fighting against the plan, because they were part of it, right? Their pride and ego and self-worth is tied to the decision that we made as a team to take this course of action. And so it actually helps to bring the troops together and approach a plan collectively, and not have people, back chatting or murmuring or rumoring that, Mike's 23 and he has no idea what he's doing, and we shouldn't do this. This was a stupid idea. Instead, it was a collective decision. 10 people made the decision, and 10 people are solving the problem. And so, that's what I mean by a collaborative approach. And it was incredibly powerful. And when I came in solving problems like that and offering leadership, a lot of people who are not natural born leaders absolutely love that. It's almost a sigh of relief. It's hallelujah, a leader has turned up, and they're willing to lead us somewhere. And if you can get them to your way of thinking, that there's often very little pushback, because they just want someone to take responsibility for the vision, the mission, the direction, and they want to get on with doing what they're really good at, which might be customer service or marketing or finance. These people aren't responsible for leading an entire organization, and most of the time don't want to be. So if someone else turns up with a plan, articulates it well, is respectful to all involved, and invites them to come along on the journey, my experience is that they're extremely grateful for that and get really excited about getting on board.
Mike, it's an amazing story, and I mean, it's easy to hear you talk about it now and believe you, because you sound confident, articulate, intelligent. It's surprising to hear you tell a story where you were too shy in a line when you reached the end of the line to actually order and talk to another human being. I feel like the real secret was unlocked in that high school period of your life, where you developed the core skills that led to these real world outcomes. Maybe just to wrap up this story, you already mentioned 3 obviously helpful books, the Think and Grow Rich, Richest Man in Babylon, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Anything else you can think of, even if it was a course you took, a mentor, coach, things that made a big impact to get this outcome to become the man that you are today, Mike?
Yeah, great. And look, there's so much has shaped me. And you're absolutely right that what I learned in that early journey through high school was that I had to keep running into the fire. I had to run into the tension and the difficulty and face fears if I wanted to grow. And I always had the drive to want to grow. I wanted that personal development. And I had the personal awareness to step back and see what I was lacking in a lot of cases. I didn't want to be, as I said, I didn't want to be the shy kid at high school that couldn't function, basically. I wanted to be confident. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to chase girls. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to do all those things. And so I went on a journey to do that. I had very, very clear clarity of purpose. And I don't mean at all to make it sound easy. There was an incredible roller coaster of emotions and challenges, obviously, through the teen years as well. A lot of failures along the way too, but that shaped me. And so, look, specific resources. I made a commitment very early on to have a commitment to lifelong learning. And, even to this day, I'm going to conferences, I'm studying courses, I'm signing up for executive education, all sorts of things. But if I go back to some of the early things, there was a book that I often refer to people, which is a great entrepreneurial story, but also a CEO story. The book is called The Knack, and it's written by a man called Norm Brodsky, who wrote for, I believe it was Inc. magazine for a good number of years. And it's a story about how he founded his business and operated it. But the thing that really unlocked a lot of learning for me and knowledge was the operating. He talked about, finding additional margin in his products and different space in his warehouses. I think he was in the self-storage or file storage business. And it's a great lens, and he's a great storyteller, but a great lens to see through how someone approaches problems in business, and not just going from 0 to 1, but from 1 to 10. So The Knack was a great book. Another great book is called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Love that book. I've read a lot of books which cover the same sort of content, but Darren distills it into a short, sharp, easily digestible book. And it's all about learning the power of compound interest. And not just in a financial sense, but also in a fitness sense, a health sense, a professional and personal development sense, education. In all areas of your life, if you do simple daily disciplines repeated consistently over time, they lead to startling results. That's a quote from Robin Sharma. But Jim Rohn and others have all said it. And I've been all over the world to attend courses by Robin Sharma, who's a Canadian. He's written some great leadership books. I've been to Toronto and Zurich and other parts of the world to see him live after enjoying his YouTube videos and books. And these days, reflecting on my journey as a mentee, when I was 22, 23, I was actually younger. When I was 21, I started The Hive, which I mentioned earlier, that not-for-profit event for entrepreneurs where we met. And a number of these speakers at The Hive ended up taking me under their wing. They were the successful entrepreneurs that had come to tell their story. And a number of them recognized that I was a young guy, hustling pretty hard, wasn't charging anything for these events, was really doing it for the right reasons. That won me a lot of respect. And I kept in touch with a lot of those speakers, and they coached and mentored me. And a number of them were members of this thing called YPO, which is called Young Presidents Organization. And I put that on the goals list. As soon as I learned about it, I put it on the goals list. I want to be a member of YPO. And, I'd looked up the criteria, and at the time, it was insane. It was insurmountable. It was, you have to run a big business with a certain number of staff, a certain amount of financial turnover, and you have to be the CEO and all these other things. But I put it on the goals list and chased it. And, around the same time that I hit that early mark of buying the Porsche at the age of 28, I also became the youngest member of YPO Queensland at 28. And I've been in YPO for the last 4 years now across Australia and Singapore. And that is my mentoring now. I'm constantly surrounded by people that are running incredible businesses in all parts of the world. And I've attended courses at Harvard Business School, London Business School, INSEAD, and every month I get together with a mastermind of other CEOs and entrepreneurs running really, really substantial businesses. And I just absorb and learn as much as I can. So that commitment to lifelong learning, which also happens to be a value of YPO, I think is incredibly important, and has certainly helped me get to where I am today.
I think that's a great point to end on, Mike. Websites, where can people find out more about you?
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a personal website, mikeboyd.com.au. I'm pretty active on Twitter. My handle there is Mike Boyd. And I've recently started a project studying multi-generational family businesses and family wealth, and how people steward, or how families steward their wealth successfully for 3, 4, 5 generations. It's just a passion project, which I love studying and love learning from, because I think endurance and building something that lasts is really interesting to me. So I've got a passion project for that called Business of Family, and you can go to businessofamily.net if that's of any interest, where we've got a podcast up and running with some interviews with incredible family members.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you for sharing the story, and hopefully inspiring some up-and-coming CEOs to follow in your footsteps, and maybe even beat that, I don't know, the 28-year-old Porsche milestone, the 23-year-old CEO milestone, whatever it is that you're going after.
You know what? If that's what motivates you, that's great. Come at me, all right? Come and beat those milestones. I'd love to hear from you when you get there at 22 or 27 or whatever works for you. That's great.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Yara. Thanks for having me.